Israel, as a nation, we know for a fact from history that God chose his people to represent him here on earth. And he's the one taking them into Egypt for a reason. Okay? And they are there enslaved in Goshen. And Moses is raised to liberate them from Egypt to Canaan. Okay? Now, remember in Psalms, there's a promise to Abraham. And the promise is given to Abraham, and the oath is made with Isaac, and the same is confirmed with Jacob. And the covenant, the everlasting covenant, is with Israel. Now, when you read that promise, it is the promise of the land of Canaan that is given to Abraham. Okay? Now, this is very important in context, because when the children of Israel are leaving Egypt and going to Canaan, which is Palestine effectively, they settle there and they have 3 kings, okay? Saul, David, and Solomon. After Solomon dies, the kingdom is split into 2, okay? The 10 tribes go in the north, and Judah and Benjamin remain in the south, where Jerusalem or Judah remains. And we see that in the north, the 10-tribe kingdom apostatized, and God uses a heathen nation, okay, to destroy them and just annihilate them. In 721 BC, we see Assyria coming to capture Israel. And the Bible says, till today, no one knows where Israel is, at least racially, because, that confusion happened. And then we have Judah, who remained. But even them, they apostatized, and God was not happy with them. And what happened? God again uses a heathen nation, Babylon, at the helm of Nebuchadnezzar. He comes and captures them, goes into captivity for 70 years, according to the prophecy of Jeremiah. And then, we have Jews, or the children of Israel, back into Jerusalem after the 70 years prophecy. Now, what is interesting here is when the 2 tribes returned to the land, they built the temple. Jesus, or Yeshua, like you're putting it, is born, and he is killed. And before he dies, he leaves a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem. And he says, your land is left unto you desolate.
Yes.
Effectively, he's saying, because you've rejected me, I have rejected you. Okay? So what we see, 70 AD, the city is encompassed. The Romans kill and they destroy Jerusalem. Okay? And the people who believed in Jesus or Christ, they leave the city and they flee all over the world. Okay, they go to Africa, they go Asia, they go everywhere they could find solace and comfort, which is very important. So then, when the Jews are destroyed, the land is taken away from them. So basically, you have no land for Israel. And that's how you find the Palestinians, the Arabs, and everyone gets the land, because the owners of the land have been removed. Now, 1914, World War I happens. 1939, World War II happens. After World War II, 1948, Britain and America create a land. Why? Because in their mind, they know that these are special people, even though they don't know the implication of the prophecy, but they feel that they have to humanly take these people back to their land. So they go there and place them in that land, what we now refer to as Israel. But there were people there, so they create that confusion. They create treaties and agreements, and that these people belong here. But ever since 1948, Israel has never known peace because, number one, they are surrounded by what can be perceived as their enemies. And number two, they themselves are not believers. So we are very sure and comfortable to say that, the government of Israel is not led by the principles of God. Now, World War II ends, and like historians and some scholars put it, that World War II did not end as we know it. Why? Because number one, no one claimed, defeat, basically. And what we are seeing here would be termed as a continuation of World War II, which we can comfortably say World War III. Now, Israel, to me, looks like it is at the center of what will eventually accumulate or epitomize to be a World War III. Iran comes out and says, we do not recognize Israel as a nation. And therefore, we promise that we're going to wipe away Israel from the face of the map of the earth.
Yes.
Now, that is a huge statement, and they've never changed that position.
Yes.
And number two, Iran has never directly attacked Israel, at least from the recent history.
Yeah.
So to have Israel receive an attack from Iran was a shocking that
Major.
sent, an ice cold in the spines of the Western, or at least the Western civilization.
Yeah, it was major.
Even America, for the first time, had to sit down and really calculate and really see if they want to get into a conflict, a direct conflict with Iran. When Iran attacks Israel, even if the missiles are intercepted, I want to get the sense from your end, because you are in Israel as we speak. How do you see this critical response that Iran did by attacking Israel? Would this be something that can escalate to a cataclysmic war that can involve the entire world?
Brother Zalo, you said a whole lot there, and allow me to zoom in on different portions of it. But to answer that last question, without question, without doubt, yes, the answer to that is yes. This is the center. This is the most hotspot, geopolitical hotspot on the planet. And when historians, and I am a historian, I'm a trained historian, when historians look back on World War I, they don't, some of them, at least from the European interpretation, they always like to start it with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand.
Yes.
But if you look at, you broaden your view and you look at it from a bigger perspective, the real beginnings of World War I began with the colonization of Africa. And it was the jealousy of European powers as they were growing and as they were modernizing and moving into the machine age and what have you. They needed these resources, and Germany had been basically left out. And it was the jealousy and friction between those European powers that led to the Berlin Conference. And that was their attempt to stave off, to head off the outbreak of war and violence between them. And it worked for a while. It held it off for what, 25, 30 years, not even that long. It held it off for a while. For about 14, 15 years, they had peace. But the friction built up and the war broke out. Now, World War II is famously described as unfinished business from World War I, okay? And it was during World War I that the British and the French, even while the war was still being fought, the British and the French made an agreement over how they were going to divide up this region right here. It was the Sykes-Picot Agreement. France got Lebanon, France got Syria, Britain got Egypt and Palestine. And so the name, and now I got to put a pin in that, where did this name Palestine come from? If you Google it today, you might get something a little different. But I have the old Googles 10 years ago when they were still saying that Palestine is the name that the Romans gave to the land that was formerly known as Judea. Now, later, when Britain was given the mandate, the Palestine mandate to rule this region, it was called just that, the Palestine Mandate. But the earlier form was the Palestini, it was Romans. It was the Romans that called this land that. But being honest, there was never a time when there were Palestinian people here. You're talking about Arabs who came into this region and basically stayed in the region. Did they all come from Arabia? No, because you have to, again, being honest, we have to look at the history of this region. And we know that this land was, when you talk about the dispersion of the children of Israel at the hands of the Romans in the year 70, if you have a military power coming from the north, which way would the majority of the people inhabiting this land, which way would they run to get away from them? South, deeper into Africa. And that's why all over Africa, you have remnants of Israelite culture in the midst of many of the different ethnic groups, whether you're in the Cameroon, in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, if you're in South Africa, northern South Africa, southern Zimbabwe, and Zambia amongst the Lemba, so you have this cultural remembrance that the people brought with them as they migrated. They couldn't bring texts because texts were big, huge scrolls. They couldn't bring artifacts because artifacts were chiseled in heavy stone. They had to help carry elders and children and provisions and changes of clothing. All they had was this cultural remembrance in our oral traditions. Now, back to again, the first wave was the Romans from the north. Later, you had the Crusades that were inspired by a French pope, Pope Urban II. He's the one who commissioned the Crusades. And in his message to them, he said, go and wrestle, snatch, take by force, wrest that land from the wicked race. Who was dwelling in this land in the year 1096? it was not Israel anymore, because Israel had been scattered already. But who was living in this land were the Moors, were the followers, the original followers of Muhammad, the original followers of Muhammad. And Muhammad was an African. Now, fast forward again, 1098, it took them about 3 years to finally even get from Europe to the Holy Land, and it took another good century to militarily overcome Muhammad, or Salah al-Din the Great, as he's known, Saladin the Great, a great Ishmaelite leader. We're talking about dark-skinned people. And the Crusades finally got the upper hand. And what did they do when they won the wars? Women and children become the spoils of that war. I can bring you documentation that says that they melted, these Europeans melted into the population of the region. But we're not talking about butter or margarine. We're talking about the gene pool. And so we know that many of the African Ishmaelite women were taken as wives and as sex slaves for these European crusader transplants. And fast forward, not just here in this land, but all across the top of Africa, this is the same phenomena that turned dark-skinned regions to fairer and fairer and fairer complexioned regions. But you can't get all of that African genealogy out. That's why Muammar Gaddafi still had that hair of wool, So that's why Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, was darker than I am. And I'm starting to get my summertime tan. I'm getting back to my normal complexion in this land soon, But Anwar Sadat was much darker than his successor, Hosni Mubarak. And so, there's so much that we look at, and there are so many missing pieces. But when you've got a few pieces here and there and you start assembling them, you can easily see how they connect. And so what I'm saying is that there is the Israeli narrative for this land. And basically that is coming from the Ashkenazic side, or the European side of that family. And there is the Palestinian narrative. And there's a third narrative for this land. And what narrative is that? It's the African narrative. And you will find that when you begin to look at it from that perspective, that is the narrative that makes the most sense. Now, I've got to say this. All of that is important for us. It's important for us who've been disenfranchised and who've been stripped of our culture, stripped of all pride and connection of our presence and source here. It's saying my connection's unstable. Can you hear me? Was that clear?
Yes. Yes.
So for us as African people that have been denigrated and whose culture has been suppressed, it's important that we reconnect with this truth and know that we have a legitimate claim here in this region. However, once we then get to that point, then we have to understand that we cannot repeat the same mistakes that others have concerning this. In other words, it's like what the prophet Isaiah said. He said, "My father's house shall be a house of prayer, for all nations. And so when you understand that the original peoples of this land look like us in this group tonight, that will give us our foundation. But once we ascend to our purpose, the purpose is to be that light. You talked about Abraham, and the promise, the covenant with Abraham was that in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So now whites, European people, are fearful of our returning back to that identity and to that mandate. Why are they fearful?
So, just one confirmation I would
Yes.
want you to clear as you go on. So can one then conclude that we have more blood of Israel or Jew on the continent than anywhere else in the world?
I'm not a geneticist, and I would simply say that scattered throughout Africa and scattered into the Western and Eastern hemispheres, because Arabs did carry many of our people into India and into the East. And of course, the great slave trade carried our people into Brazil, into the Caribbean, into North America, that a substantial number, we just will say a substantial number of our people are indeed Israelite or of Israelite extraction and ancestry. No question about it. That is not to say that all Africans are Israelites. That's not true. But all Israelites, all Israelites from antiquity were African. Okay? Does that give us that foundation?
It does. It does. It does.
So
you can go on.
Okay. So where was I? I was talking about this living up to this purpose.
Yes.
And if you go back to, we're in a, Brother Jado, we're in a very unique situation here in the land of Israel, because we are a very small minority of the population of the country. Even when you add us to the Ethiopian Jews who were brought in the 70s, 80s, okay? Even when you add us to the Afro-Palestinians who live in this land, who live in Jericho, who live in Jerusalem, that have never left this land, when you add to this African population the Afro-Bedouins who live all throughout this region, who are the authentic indigenous people of the land, but who are scattered and hidden, basically. When you read the 83rd division of the Psalms, it talked about thy hidden ones, the peoples who were hidden, and that conspiracy that they had to cause Israel to be no more in their remembrance. We're the victims of an international conspiracy. And so even adding all of those elements, even adding the thousands of Eritreans who migrated here, the thousands of Sudanese who are illegal immigrants here, we're still a very small minority in the country. But then when you take the element of the Jews who live here in this land, who are from the Mizrahi side of the family, that means they're from Yemen. That's part of Africa. Yemen is the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula is geographically part of Africa. You're talking about Moroccan Jews. Morocco is North Africa. We're talking about Tunisian and Egyptian Jews that came here. They're all in that part of the family, and they number almost 50% of the Jewish family here. So they are Africans. And in the 1970s, the early 70s, we were just getting our roots here. The Moroccans formed a self-help organization, and guess what they called it? The Black Panthers. Now, where did they get that from? Okay. But now let's broaden it again. Let's broaden it a little further. And we know that from what is called the out of Africa model, that from the earliest origins of humanity, when the Bible says that the first man was planted in a garden eastward in Eden, where is that garden? It's somewhere between Ethiopia and Samaria. It's in this region right here. This is where the first man was formed. So that means that all humanity, they're Africans. So we have to, now we can laugh about it, but they might have a problem with that. And that's going to be their problem. That's not our problem, that's their problem. Because we know, and again, I asked the question before you had me go back. I asked the question, why are Europeans so afraid of our returning to that identity and returning to these roots? They are afraid because they think that we will do to them what they did to us when we get the upper hand. But that goes against what our instructions are from the Most High. We're forbidden to do that. Isaiah says that a stranger can get a name and a place greater than of sons and daughters, because it's all about the spirit now. It's about the purpose.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Sar Ahmadiel, I have limited time, and I know that we can go on and on. But what you've said is so profound, because it speaks to the identity of God's people, and that also the other point I appreciate is that God's people are dotted across the globe, across the globe. And thirdly, from what you've said, I get a sense that there has to be a repurpose or a refocus of what we would call as a second exodus, which is to say that God's people have to return to the land that was given to their forefathers.
Yes.
And that is confirmed or affirmed by Jeremiah, Nehemiah, Zechariah,
yes,
and all the prophets in the Bible. Yes. My question to you is, this Holy Land that we are referring to, Jerusalem and the surrounding area, and you rightly say that Africa is part of the land that, you know, God's people you know, habitated, and even history confirms that civilization started from Africa. Okay.
Yes.
Now this land, Sar Ahmadiel, there's war, there's confusion, there's catastrophe, if you like.
Yeah.
And this is where I want our conversation to end from, which is to say that Israel is getting involved in war. If I can count right now, you have Israel fighting with Hamas in Gaza. You have Israel fighting with Lebanon in the north. You have Israel with a new war fighting with Iran. Okay. Now, from how I see it, it is as though this war is still a proxy war. Yeah. You have China and Russia standing on the fence from the Eastern Bloc, and you have America, Britain, Germany, France, and them standing on the fence from the Western side or the Western bloc. How do you read the proxy war that we see? Because I mean, America has invested so much in Israel. I was just looking at the budget of the defense budget of Israel alone is over $24 billion.
Yeah.
That would end poverty in Africa, Sar Ahmadiel. but these two blocks, the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, are watching from the fences. Should you touch Israel, we are coming for you. But also Russia and China are saying America should not be involved. Otherwise, we're getting involved. What are you reading from this whole proxy war and the actual war between Israel and Iran?
Oh, well, again, you said a whole lot, and I'm clear that you are an astute observer of the situation. This indeed is our Passover season, and Passover marks that first Exodus. And in May, we are celebrating what we call New World Passover, which is commemorating our leaving America in 1967 and returning back here. So in our view, the second Exodus is already underway. And we're not worried about the fact that many of them, first of all, aren't even awake and prepared to make the move. So, the gates here might be kind of closed off for them momentarily. But there's all of the African continent that whose arms are open and prepared to receive their brethren, at least many of them. Now, the book of Revelation, 18th chapter, says, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her plagues." Now, that is a command to begin that Exodus. But the interesting thing about it is that to come out of the Western world to where we were scattered, it's bigger than that, because the Western world has conquered the world, the whole earth, with their ideas. And so you in Zambia, you are now being virtually colonized by virtue of South African investments and influx of their steers and shop rights and what have you that are infiltrating. But that idea is a European idea. And so our brethren on the continent, we have to come out too from that idea, from under the influence of that idea. So it's broad in this day and time. It's not just as simple as just coming from one land to another. It's coming out of a mindset. Now, the scriptures tell us, Ezekiel tells us that in these days that the Creator would put hooks in certain nations' jaws and would bring them to this land, to the valley of Jehoshaphat, to the valley of decision. Jehoshaphat,
yes.
That's judgment. That's judgment, Armageddon. This is the center. This is where those armies are being drawn into this conflagration for the purpose of their destruction. Now, how do we fit? Where do we go? Well, this is our home. But if you've ever, I'm sure you've. Well, I don't know, because in Zambia, I don't think you've had experiences with hurricanes or tornadoes as such. But hurricanes, the safest place to be in a hurricane is in the middle. And so and some people might think, oh, you're being mystical and spooky now. No, we are simply being true to the faith that we are called upon to have. We've been 56, 57 years outside of America. We've been through all kinds of hardships and challenges and tribulation. And we've come through each time. So we have testimonies of that Yah is with us and Yah is guiding us. And so we as African people, that is our greatest strength, our spirituality defined as our relationship with the Creator. So we're comfortable. We're comfortable that when we follow certain instructions, and even in this dispensation of time, Brother J-Lo, and I know, I was so happy to have met you because you're pushing the vegan lifestyle, the vegan course, which is God-given. It, in fact, for those who might want to slaughter lambs and what have you on Passover, you have to go back to the Genesis and the first chapter, the first book. And we were given our instructions for diet, but we fell. And Moses later said, okay, you can eat this animal, eat that bird, eat that, what have you, that fish. But the original instructions were vegan, plant-based. And so our spiritual leader took us all the way back to that beginning. And there are so many different laws and instructions that are founded upon the laws in the Genesis that in many ways will render subsequent laws as they don't even apply to us anymore, because we've gotten back to that beginning again. And instead of falling, now we can continue to ascend in our lifestyle and in our culture and teachings. So we're comfortable. We're here in the middle of this, and that relationship, we are certain. What I wanted to say was one of the things that our spiritual leader that he instituted in our dietary consciousness was that we needed to consume kelp, seaweed. And you can get it in tablet form, you can get it in powdered form. There's all different types of seaweed. But why seaweed? Why should seaweed be a part of our diet? It's very simple. The soil is now stripped of nutrients, and particularly micronutrients. And one of those micronutrients is called iodine. And iodine is essential for the proper functioning of the thyroid gland and keeping the metabolism of the body in check. But what the thyroid gland also does, when it's in balance with enough iodine, it absorbs radiation. And so whether it's radiation from these or from the laptop in front of us, or the televisions, or the EMFs that are in the atmosphere, or if it's radiation from a nuclear holocaust on the planet, having iodine in your system is going to be important for our survival. And that's just one of many, 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 many instructions and lifestyle principles and part of our dietary regimen that we say erects a shield of protection around us, because we are following those biblical and those revelatory instructions that we've been given. So we're good. We don't know the day, the hour. We don't have a magic ball here, but we do have the prophets. And we're looking very closely at what they have said about these times, so that when they unfold, our teachers prepared us well. When we see things unfold, we were like, wow. And we can go to the scripture and we can say, we were told that this was going to happen when 30, 40, 50 years ago, you'd be hard pressed to say, how is that going to happen? You know, so yes, Iran is referred to in the scriptures. Those of you who are Catholic, your Bibles contain the Apocrypha. And in the book of Second Esdras, it speaks of the Carmonians raging in wrath. Carmonians are Persians. Iran, their name, Iran was, that was the name that the Persians changed their name to in 1935. So they didn't get away because they changed their name. We see you, you know, and we see where you fit in this. They have a role to play. This land does have to undergo a purging. There will be a judgment. There is judgment unfolding now. So going back to this issue of World War III, J-Lo, World War III is unfinished business from World War II. So it has already begun. And the cleansing, you look at what's going on in Ukraine, which nobody's paying attention to anymore now that they focused their eyes on Gaza. You know, that's, they call that, what do they call it? A meat grinder. It's just like in World War I in Flanders. You know, these armies just pulverized, killing hundreds of thousands of young men dying. What foolishness. What foolishness. So the entire planet has been dehumanized. We're not happy to see what's happening to the Palestinians and Gazans. We're not happy about that. We weren't happy about what happened when certainly weren't happy about what Hamas did when they invaded here. We got children in the army. My son was on a base there, but he wasn't there that morning. He was home that weekend. So we don't like to see this. It's sad. It's a sad time on the planet, but we cannot lose our focus on what Yeshua told us. He said all of that was only the beginning of sorrows.
Of sorrows.
The
Right.
beginning of sorrows.
Yeah. That point you make there, that all of this was just the beginning of sorrows. So meaning we can only expect more, isn't it? We can only expect more. You say something also very important. You say the land has to go through cleansing, and you refer to Iran as part of, you know, the entire prophecy that they should be involved actually to bring about this confusion that will end up cleansing the entire land. It's almost as though it's a detox, but through destruction, right?
Yes. But
the scriptures, when we go to Zechariah, and I end with this point, Sar Ahmadiel, because it's 9:23 here, and I guess it's 10:23 there. We should be ending at 9:30. But I want to end with this point. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 1 and 2, and Isaiah chapter 14, verse 31 and 32. These scriptures point to a fact that there is going to be a war. And that war is going to be centered around Jerusalem. Zechariah chapter 14. Yes. That all nations shall be involved in a war surrounding Jerusalem. And Isaiah tells us that Israel shall be destroyed. Palestine shall be dissolved. Okay. Now, Israel's destruction, it's very strange to say, but Israel's destruction is important and should happen so that God's people can be liberated. Is that correct?
Let me say this. I wanted to say it a little earlier. There's two Israels. There's the modern state of Israel, and then there's the ancient historical reality of the people of Israel and the land of Israel, which is much bigger than the current borders of the
Exactly.
state. And so
Yes.
the promised land is from the Nile to the Euphrates, which is much, much broader, much, much bigger. This is going to overturn, as Ezekiel promised. That has to happen. But now, when you talk about, the cleansing. There's two different scriptures that talk about swords and plowshares and pruning hooks and spears. And actually, it's three different scriptures. Two of them deal with the idea of taking a sword and
turning
it into a plowshare, something to feed people with, an agricultural implement. So now, but the other scripture found in Joel says they shall take their pruning hooks and beat them into spears, and their plowshares into
pruning hooks.
The other way around. So you and I, who have to come together and forge the future for humanity, you and I have to no longer beat each other up with our doctrinal differences. So we have to beat our swords into plowshares. But do you think that that is a reference that is saying that an American F-35 or F-16 is going to be made into a crop duster, or that a M60 Abrams tank is going to be made into a tractor? No, they're going to use those weapons. Those will be their war is the consequence of the evil that they have perpetrated on the planet. That $95 billion budget that America is now beginning to ship out of all those weapons, that's going into somebody's pockets. The warmongers of the planet, they are evil, and there's no other way we can define that. So we know that we are in this era of this judgment, of this cleansing, and we just have to maintain and ride the tidal wave of destruction. We have to keep our heads above the water. We have to keep enough of a shield around us of spiritual protection, because at the end of the day, where can we go on the planet where we could find real safety? So if we can't. If we don't find our safety in the rock, in the refuge, capital R, then all this is for naught. We might as well all just go in and get us a Mercedes or a BMW and a big house somewhere, which we could do. You and I could do that. But we've been called with another mission. We have another purpose and mandate. And so we just have to have a part two, Brother J-Lo.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. We have 2 minutes to go. What do you think would be the implication of an atomic war, a nuclear war on the global scale? What do you think would be the results?
Not by fire, not by water, but fire this time. The results are pretty evident. There was an African-American journalist. His name was, it was on 60, Ed Bradley. Ed Bradley was his name. And after the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes went to Russia, and he was in one of the nuclear silos with a Russian general. And in conversation, he was shocked to find out that Russian nuclear missiles were still programmed to hit America. That never changed. That never changed. He was shocked. I'm still looking for that footage. It's not on YouTube apparently. I'm still looking for it. But those missiles, that is going to take place. That has to happen in order for these days to be shortened. Whose dominion would have to be shortened? Nigeria doesn't have any nuclear missiles. Zambia doesn't have any nuclear weapons. Even South Africa doesn't have an arsenal that could take out the whole world. So who would have to be neutralized? It's America and the global North. Russia and America prophetically are destined to clash. And you quoted Zechariah. Zechariah describes perfectly the results of a nuclear blast, that their eyes will consume in their sockets. That is the physical, what will happen if radiation, close range radiation, was to occur. So we're looking at this scenario. We see it. We've been promised, and we see enough. We see the nations being drawn in, and at this time, we have a saying. We're gonna get our popcorn, and we're gonna be here watching. So but we're confident that the Creator did not bring us 4,000 miles to this
Only
land,
to be destroyed.
back to only to die at the hands of a nuclear weapon, or at the hands of a Hamas pop rocket. No, or Iranian drones. That's not in the plan. That's not in the plan.
Right. Amazing. Amazing. Sar Ahmadiel Ben Yahuda, it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. We have people who would want to say something here, but I think what we may have to do is to do what we can call a question and answer session. So those of us who have questions can type them up right now in the message section. And then, God willing, if Sar Ahmadiel can create some time, maybe next week, same day, same time, we'll then come back and then have a conversation more on the responses from this conversation, and then answer the people who may have missed one or two things, bring to speed the people who may have remained on the conversation. But for me, it's always mind-boggling, it's always intriguing, it's always interesting to really delve into the intricacy of identity, purpose, and God's people and where they are headed to. Because I think that Christianity or Christendom has been distorted so much that we are only a reflection of a shadow now. But the true scriptures really deal with the real stuff. And this is what we've been discussing. Yeah. So thank you so much. Any closing remarks?
Just that, I miss you, and I'm looking forward to getting that side again soon. I only just yesterday morning postponed headed to South Africa for the second time. The first time was the week of October 7th. It was about the 10th that I was actually planning to leave to come to South Africa. And it's from South Africa that I jump into Zambia and jump into DRC. But I'm looking forward to it. These things will not completely prevent that from happening. Myself and others who will be the angels that will be coming and going, bringing this word from Jerusalem. And we as angels, I said this when I was in Zambia, that I'm an angel. It's just that I leave my wings at the airports. So I do plan on coming. In fact, my wife and I were there at one point. She's looking forward to it. She's a senior midwife with us, and she did some work with the midwives there.
Oh yes, we were supposed to host them. Yes.
Right. So we haven't forgotten you. You are not forsaken. We will continue. And in fact, we want to organize. In fact, I think I'm pretty sure that many of the those who are present this evening are part of a delegation that came to visit us a couple years ago. And so we want to organize more trips like that where they can come and see Northeast Africa. That many of our people, many of you there in Zambia actually do have authentic connections with. So it's my pleasure. I look forward to the next time, either virtually like here or virtually in person. I would much rather it be, that we could connect personally. But we're going to keep the lights on because the world again is in great darkness, and we have to. Africa is our future. Africa is our future. Africa's been preserved for this day. So, when you talk about going back to that last question, any nuclear fallout, what I found, and it was interesting, the atmospheres of the North and South do not merge as much as we might think. They don't mingle. And so what that means is that the pollution, the fallout from any radioactivity, from any nuclear fallout, will basically stay in the North because there aren't very many tactical or strategic locations in the South that they would and are training their missiles to hit. That's just the reality of it. So that will be to our advantage. But
right,
we're good. My love and blessings on behalf of all your brothers and sisters here. We appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate your prayers, your thoughts. We do ride on those. Those do help to protect us, and we're grateful and appreciative. And so may the Holy One of Israel bless and keep you, cause His face to shine upon you, and grant you peace. Shalom.
amen. Shalom and shalom. That was just a prayer that you offered there. Thank you so much. I've put my number onto the chat. Okay, so those who would want to get some more information, literature, or further discussion or engagement for that matter, you can just reach me on that number. And then we are going to confirm during the week.
There. Put your country code on.
Country code, yes. That's correct. So let me just put my country code. There you go. So my name is Yellow RC. That's my number. You can reach me out and I will pick the questions and we'll confirm during the week whether we'll have the conversation on a Wednesday. Shalom, shalom, Sar Ahmadiel.
Shalom,
great.
Shalom. Hallelujah.
Thank you.
Torah.
Good night.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Likewise.
Bye.
Shalom, everybody.
Great.